I think Monkey D. Dragon is top 3 strongest minimum. And before you say I'm crazy, let me ask you a question. Where would you rank Prime Luffy and Prime Garp in terms of strength? Because in my opinion, Prime Luffy is gonna be the GOAT and Prime Garp was competing with the current GOAT. So I think it's gotta make sense that the guy in the middle is also a monster. Unless he's like adopted, which to be fair, I don't know how this made that. But yeah, Dragon to me is currently one of the strongest characters, if not possibly the strongest, which means the bag of powers that he has is gonna be second to few. But before we get to Dragon's incredible powers, we have to start this discussion with his story. Because despite it being one of the biggest reasons why he's slept on by a lot of people, it's also one of the biggest reasons why it's evident that he's a monster. You see, so far in the story, what we've seen from Dragon has been a very little amount, so not that many people care that much about him. In the 4 popularity polls that he's been a part of, he's never placed higher than 62. So Dragon's popularity is not very high, and that includes his own son, who's the main character. Which, to be fair, he's never really been around for Luffy's life besides that one child support payment he made at Lockdown. That being said though, from the little that we've seen from him in the story, he's still been portrayed as an incredibly important character. Like, this man is the leader of the Revolutionary Army. I feel like low-key that's a little overlooked. Because think about all of these people that just willingly serve under him, and it starts with Sabo. Because he's a very prominent and strong character, especially after the recent events. You see, when Sabo was first reintroduced into the story, he really felt like a replacement of Ace. Because pretty much that's what Oda did with him. After Ace dies, this other strong brother just comes back to life.
Surprise, motherfucker.
But yeah, as soon as Sabo was reintroduced in Dressrosa, we have this portrayal of him as a very strong and reliable character that's probably even stronger than Luffy in Dressrosa. Right off the bat, when we see him in action, he handles Jesus Burgess like it's nothing, which you might think that's not very impressive, but you gotta remember he is a Titanic captain of a Yonko crew now. But if Burgess wasn't enough, Sabo then goes toe-to-toe with an admiral in Fujitora. Like, that in itself was really a big signal that not only is Sabo a monster, but Dragon is even more of a monster. Because guess who was the person that trained Sabo? Dragon. He literally even uses an attack called Dragon's Claw, which I'm sure is one of the many moves that Dragon taught him. But yeah, as soon as we found out about how strong Sabo was, that was a clear indication that Dragon is elite. I do think even despite that, because of how little we knew of Dragon, a lot of us were hesitant to put him in the top tier. But with the recent events of the Reverie, Sabo's stock is rising. Because he, along with the other revolutionary officers, fought Green Bull and Fujitora, and they won.
What? Sabo and a few good men!
I know they had a numbers advantage, but you gotta remember they had a mission of rescuing Kuma, and they were in enemy territory. So them being able to get out of there is a massive W, and Sabo even had some time to scope around and find out about Emu. And by association, that's another massive W for Dragon, because Sabo, along with all of these officers, serve under Dragon. And not only that, but he also has Kuma working under him, a former warlord. And even someone like Ivankov showed in Impel Down in Marine 4 that he's pretty strong. So with Dragon being the leader of all of these people, it speaks to his strength. Honestly, what I think gives Dragon even more credibility is his future role in the story. Which, speaking about the future, if you don't want to miss any future videos on this channel, hit that subscribe button. But yeah, this is a big point for me, because a character's future role in the story is one of the biggest points about how I power scale. I'm not someone that likes to overanalyze things about
this person beat that guy, but then that guy beat that guy, and then this guy cut something that big, but then that guy cut something that big.
There's just too many inconsistencies to try to power scale in that way. Instead, what I mostly think about is what is a character's role in the story, and if someone has a bigger role in the future, that probably means they're most likely stronger. Because as the story progresses, things are just gonna keep elevating, and that includes power. Which is why Blackbeard has always been near the top of my leaderboard, because he's gonna be one of the final villains for Luffy. To a lesser extent, I feel the same way about Akainu, because I think he's gonna fight Luffy in the future as well. And Dragon is also right there at the top, and honestly, maybe should be higher. Because out of all the remaining characters, he's someone that is almost guaranteed to be in that final war against the world government. Unless Oda kills off Dragon before that, which I don't think is gonna happen. But yeah, this man is the leader of the single opposition against the world government, a conflict that has been really building up recently. And in my opinion, I'm almost certain that the world government is gonna be the last thing that we address. With the way the story is progressing, it just makes too much sense for this world government conflict to keep building in the background until Luffy gets the laugh tail and figures out out the truth and then finally confronts Emu. So by association, I think Dragon will be showcasing his skills in the final arc of One Piece. Where on the other hand, someone like Blackbeard we might be confronting next if we end up going to Beehive. And even with Akainu, although I think Luffy is gonna fight him, it might not be that prolonged of a fight because of how many things will be involved in that final war. So you can certainly make an argument that out of all the characters we've yet to see in action, Dragon is the strongest, which honestly could be kind of fitting if Luffy has to surpass his own dad to be the GOAT. The only thing that really hurts Dragon's case is that most likely he's gonna confront Emu, and we don't know if Emu themselves is actually strong, but at the very least in the recent chapters we did see that Emu has a monstrous weapon at hand. And overall, one thing I've been repeatedly saying is that this final saga is gonna be a crazy power climb, because we're gonna be having things like ancient weapons and the national treasure of Marijois involved, and islands are gonna be destroyed. I think because of that, the characters involved in this war will need to be strong enough to compete. For example, by the end of the story, Luffy might be strong enough to just demolish Fishman Island by himself. And because Dragon is gonna be a big part of that war as well, I think his powers are also gonna be at that level, because he's definitely gonna be confronting Emu and the massive power that they have. He could end up getting into some skirmishes with admirals as well, maybe some of the Gorosei if they're actually strong. We recently found out about the Knights of God, so maybe they're a sneaky strong group as well. And overall, you just gotta believe that Oda is gonna deliver on the teases he's given on Dragon's power and story, because at this point we barely know anything about this guy. We don't even know why he has a face tattoo. All we've gotten are these little tidbits of information, like him being at Roger's execution and him having Luffy sometime between that and starting the Revolutionary Army. So eventually we need to see Dragon in action, not only to get his story, but also see him showcase his powers to back up that Monkey D name. Because as far as his powers go, we've seen very little. We got one tease all the way back in chapter 100, where he made his one payment of child support and affected the weather to save Luffy's life. And honestly, this is one of the hardest moments to really power scale and speculate, because we see so little and it's also so early on. Like, that moment literally happened like over 20 years ago. So in comparison to all the stuff we've seen recently with sky splitting hockey and island sized fists, Dragon stopping pre-time skip Buggy and Smoker doesn't really feel that impressive. Despite that though, it's still such a unique power of affecting the weather, which gives it a ton of potential. One of the most popular theories as to what that power is Uranus, because it's the god of the sky. So the connection is definitely there with maybe it being a devil fruit that Dragon has, or just a weapon that he has. At the same time, we might have just seen Emu use Uranus on Sabo, although I personally still think that it's most likely the national treasure Marijois. But the idea that I like the most is that that power is some sort of devil fruit, because that means that Dragon will need to learn it and control it and use it himself. And if it is a devil fruit, the simple answer could be is that it's just a strong paramecia. I think the much cooler possibility would be that Dragon also has a mythical Zoan. I know recently one theory that has popped up is the idea that there are 4 god fruits in this world. My guy Evil made a theory video on this, which I'll link below, but the general idea behind this theory is back in the Skypiea flashback, we found out about 4 gods, and one of them was the sun god, which we now know Luffy has the devil fruit of, and one of them is the god of rain, which could perfectly make sense for Dragon's devil fruit. So that theory is an interesting idea. The only reason I'm a little hesitant is the fact that there's a god of forest and people speculate that to be Green Bull, and I just feel like it'd be kind of weird for him to have one of the god devil fruits. He also said himself that he's a Logia. But as far as other possibilities go, I do feel like having a mythical dragon fruit is pretty fitting for Dragon. I know we did just see a dragon with Kaido's fruit, but technically Kaido's a fish, and the idea of Western dragons is one I've been really fascinated with in One Piece, because they do actually exist in the story. We know that previously Ryuma slayed one, and even most recently Vegapunk was doing experiments to recreate them. So real Western dragons are a thing in One Piece, we just haven't seen them yet. And who else could be more fitting to be related to them than a guy named Dragon? So as far as his powers go, the idea I like the most for Dragon is a mythical Zoan that is dragon related. But of course, that's not gonna be the only thing Dragon has in his bag. I fully expect him to have elite hockey. First off, Conqueror's Haki, I feel like no doubt he's gonna have it. Not only does the rest of his family have it, but just with the type of person he is as a leader, Conqueror's Haki makes perfect sense. As far as advanced Conqueror's Haki, I don't see why not, because I feel like Garp definitely has it. Because for people like Garp and Roger that did not have devil fruits, they had to have insane Haki to be that strong. And I fully expect, just like Luffy, Dragon was trained by Garp, and probably even more so. And you also gotta remember, Dragon is a grown-ass man. This guy is 55 years old. He's been through a lot of experiences that probably honed his skills, so I expect his Haki to be really sharp. And with his name being Dragon, I feel like it'd be more fitting for him to be more physical attack based. Like Future Sight is not completely out of the question because Kaido also had it, but if Dragon were to specialize in some Haki, I would assume that it's more so towards armament and conquerors. And in general, when Dragon finally steps into action, I expect him to have a huge bag of power from a mythical Zoan to elite Haki across the board, which makes him in my mind without a doubt top 3 minimum. But let me know what you guys think. Peace!